In this video, I'm going to be talking about troubleshooting, basic troubleshooting. You may find yourself at a station or supporting a station and you go off the air. Well, what are you going to do? How are you going to recover? How do you try to figure out what the issue is? That is what we're going to cover right now. So, imagine, let's say you're the station engineer or the technical person responsible for the station. And you're at home, you're asleep, you're thinking about, dreaming about, your audio levels are just sitting there perfectly at minus 20 lufs or minus 24 lufs, and the music is at the right level, the spots are at the right level, or your transmitter is at a 1-to-1 VISWAR and there's no reflected power and it's a perfect match, and then all of a sudden you're jolted awake. And it's this horrendous sound like it's the end of the world. You open your eyes, it's dark in your room, and you realize it's your phone ringing. You pick up your phone, you answer, hello, and you realize it's somebody from the station saying, "We're off the air!" What's the first thing you do? What's the first question you ask? How are you going to figure out how to solve this? You may even be able to solve this in 2 seconds over the phone. So what's the first question you ask? Well, the first question that I ask is, are you hearing silence or are you hearing static? The answer to that question will really determine where you go in your troubleshooting steps. If the station is silent, it's probably an audio problem. If it's static, it's probably an RF problem. So where you go is really dependent on how this is answered. Okay, let's start with the first part. It's silent. So the station says, it's silent, I don't hear anything. Okay, next question. Do you have your monitors turned up? There have been times where I've seen it. The operator turns the monitors off or their headphones off, and they were taking a phone call or whatever. They were watching a YouTube video and they didn't want to be disturbed. I've seen it happen. Are your monitors on? Are they turned up? Are they listening to the right thing? Those little mini questions usually will get you in the right ballpark. Okay, the next question. Do you see programming? Do you see levels on the meters in program 1? So your console will have meters. They will, be usually 2 bar graphs that bounce, or there'll be needles, or a display of some sort on the screen that shows levels. So the question is, do you see levels on the screen in program 1? Now your console will have multiple different buses, usually. And usually, program 1 is the one that goes out to air. If there's no audio in that bus, well, there's not going to be any audio going out to the station, out to the transmitter, and away you go. You're not going to be on the air. So, is there programming? If not, okay, what source are you supposed to be playing? Is it an automation, a computer playout? If that's what it is the computer on? Did it crash? Is it in a stopped condition? Some automations will give you the ability to pause the automation or stop the playlist. And if that's the case, you go silent. I have seen that many, many times. So looking at the automation, making sure that it's playing, it's doing what it needs to do, making sure that the channels are turned on for the automation to play out, making sure that those channels are assigned to program 1, so that way they go out to the right source. Okay, we've just confirmed that we have audio in program 1. What's the next thing we go look at? Well, let's go look at the studio to transmitter link. Your studio to transmitter link will generally have meters on the front of it showing the input to it. So if we look at our chain from last week, we have the console feeding into the STL. So let's look at the STL. Let's make sure there's meters, the input meters are bouncing on that. If not, okay, we need to look at that cable that goes between the console and the STL. You may have other things in between, let's say like a Nielsen encoder or a profanity delay or some other device, but typically it's going to go from the console to the STL, and away we go. So let's continue on. Our STL, it's got meters. They're bouncing. Let's go look now at the other ends. That means probably a trip to the transmitter site. You may be able to see the other side remotely. If so, well, let's look and see that you have meters on the output of the STL. If you do, okay, let's move on from there. But if you don't, okay, what could be those possible failures that would cause audio to go into the STL but not out of the STL? Well, how is your STL being fed? Is it over the internet? Make sure you have an internet connection. Usually remote mountaintop sites are pretty difficult to get good, solid connection for internet. Is it a microwave, a point-to-point private microwave? Is the microwave link working? Is it through the phone company? Is the phone company having problems? These are all different things that are pretty much out of your control, but you at least have an idea of where to go and what things to ask for help for. So we have our STL, we have audio coming out of it. The next thing, remember back to last week when we looked at the broadcast air chain, the next thing is the audio processor. Okay, audio processor. It has meters as well. Are those meters bouncing? Yes or no? If yes, okay, let's move on. But if not, okay, somewhere on the cable from the STL output to the input of the audio processor, there's a problem. It could be a cable. It could be your audio processor also is looking at the wrong source. A lot of audio processors will have multiple inputs for audio, either an analog and a digital or two analogs or whatever. But you would need to go into the audio processor, make sure that it is looking at the right input. And sometimes it'll tell you right there on the display. Usually on these audio processors, there's a screen and it'll show you the input on one side and the output on the other. Make sure you have the output on the screen there, so that way you can confirm that audio is passing through the audio processor, that there's not some sort of configuration issue or bypass or something that's causing it to not work right and output audio. Now let's move on to the transmitter. The audio processor should be connected to the transmitter. And your transmitter, you should see modulation. It should have some sort of meter on it that tells you how much modulation is happening. If that's not moving at all, well, again, now let's look at making sure your audio processor is outputting audio, and then making sure that your transmitter is looking at the right input. If you're connected from your audio processor to your transmitter by a composite cable, well, make sure that your transmitter is looking for composite. If it's connected by audio, like analog audio, make sure that the transmitter is looking for analog audio. You see where I'm going here with this. Now, if your transmitter is saying it's modulating and you aren't sure, well, go back out to your car. Use that radio that you have in your car and check. Listen. That's a really good diagnostic tool. Tune around on your radio and listen to other stations. Make sure that they're on. And if you don't hear anybody else, probably your radio's broken. That's not going to help you very well. But you'll hear other stations, you'll hear how loud they are, and that way you know that your radio is working, you have it at a good level. Flip back to your station. Do you hear anything? Yes or no? If not, all right, you need to call in the big guns. You need to call in an engineer, someone who can help you really troubleshoot this problem. But generally, you will have solved 99.9% of all of your issues within that first 30 seconds with that first phone call of, is it silent? Is it static? Are you listening to the right thing? Are your sources turned on? And that should get you most of the way. And if not, if you do have to call in the big guns and call in for an engineer, a contract engineer typically, at least you can walk them through the troubleshooting steps that you've been through. You can say, yes, I've confirmed there's audio coming from the studio. Yes, I've confirmed there's audio going into the STL. Yes, there's audio coming out of the STL. Yes, there's audio in the audio processor. And yes, I see the transmitter modulating. That will help them help you. It speeds up the process quite a bit. Now they can stop thinking of, okay, maybe it's probably an audio problem or an operator problem or this and that. No, they can go straight to, okay, all those things are right. Let's start looking at bigger, more deeper problems. Now, I will say this. I have had this happen. There was one time at my previous employer where we had this one show that was playing on the air, and the meters were bouncing, and you turn up the speakers for program, and you can hear it in program, but on the air, it was silent. What? You can look, STL, the audio processor, they all showed audio levels, but what was happening was that, okay, so the station was transmitting in mono, which means it takes the left channel and it takes the right channel, sums them together to make a mono feed. Now, when you do that, and you have something that's out of phase, some of you already are going, oh, that's what the issue was. Yeah, the program was out of phase. So when you have something that's out of phase, you have your waveform on your left channel going like this, and then you have your right channel going like this. Now, when they're in phase, they're typically, the peaks are at the same time, the valleys are at the same time, but when they're out of phase, the peaks and the valleys are at the same time. So when you sum them, what do you get when you get a +1 and a -1? You get 0. So that is exactly what happens when you sum together something that's out of phase. So yeah, that was a fun one to figure out. If your console lets you just choose one side, like a left or a right, do that, and usually your audio will come back right away. Okay, well that's enough for now. That'll get you really quickly started on troubleshooting. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this series. If you enjoyed this series, watch the playlist. I have other topics in there that we were going over the broadcast basics. Otherwise, stick around, look at some of the other videos. I have some really fun adventure videos up in the snow and mountains at the previous job in Southern California, but now I'm in the Denver area. So anyways, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this channel. I appreciate you. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you next time.